If you're coming to Paris, then chances are you don't want to be robbed or scammed. In this video, I'm going to detail all of the most common Paris scams as well as how to avoid them. The first thing to know is that Paris is actually quite safe. There's rarely any violent crime against tourists, and so it's probably just as safe as your hometown. With that being said, petty crime is really common here, as common here as probably Rome or London, and so this is what I'm going to detail in today's video. Honestly, as a tourist, the main thing you're going to come across is pickpockets. Now, there are two main ways that I do to avoid this when I'm walking the streets of Paris. The first is to have a phone cord so that my phone is always attached to me. If you just leave it in a pocket, chances are someone's just gonna grab it while they brush past you. The other thing I do is always keep my valuables right on me by having a bag like this. I always use a crossbody bag, and when I'm on places like the metro or busy crowds, I keep my hand over my bag. I would never use an open bag here in Paris. Never ever leave your bag unattended. This includes just on the table in a cafe. I know a lot of people who've been their things have been stolen that way, and basically what will happen is they'll leave their phone or their bag without being attached to them, and then someone will just walk past, grab it when they're looking the other way, and it's gone forever. When you're on the metro itself, try and stay away from the doors and move further inside the carriages if possible. Pickpockets will often target people closer to the doors so that they can make a quick escape. You should also avoid using your phone close to the door, especially if you don't have a phone cord, as pickpockets can grab your phone from your hand as the door is closing, and then it's pretty much impossible to get back. And while we're on the subject of pickpockets, do be careful for people pretending to be plainclothes police officers. One time at this station, which is Anvers, a man approached me as I was getting out the station and said, "Oh, a man just had his phone stolen. Can you open your bag and show me what's inside?" He was obviously a pickpocket, so if anyone in plain clothing approaches you and pretends they're a policeman, do not open your bag. As well as avoiding pickpockets, there's one main scam you need to avoid in the metro, and I'm going to show it to you now. So the scam is like this. Basically, when you're going to buy a ticket, such as at Gare du Nord, someone will approach you who's not in a marked uniform, and they'll say, "Do you want help buying a ticket?" And they actually won't help you. What will happen is that they'll charge you for a child's ticket or some other kind of ticket which is much cheaper than the usual price. So you'll end up with an invalid ticket that could lead to a fine, and then they'll keep your change. If you do get help, then make sure you get help from a marked officer who's in a uniform, or go to one of the many bornes, which are the help points. They're not at every station, but you can also find that the screen can be changed into English, so that could help you too. When it comes to taking a taxi in Paris, there are three main things you need to know. The first is never to get in any unlicensed taxi. Often when you arrive somewhere like Gare du Nord, someone will approach you and say, "Do you want a taxi?" And then you'll follow them to an unmarked cab. All official Paris taxis are marked like this, and they'll have their license displayed and everything. The second is that even if you do get in a marked taxi at the airport, make sure that they charge you a fixed price. So the two main Paris airports are Paris Charles de Gaulle and Orly. From these two airports, basically there's a fixed charge to get to Paris. Some taxi drivers will try and overcharge you, so do check the price in advance. The third thing to know about taking a taxi in Paris is that if you're going to get an Uber or a Lyft, make sure that the number plate on the app matches the car that turns up. It's happened to me a couple of times, and also friends, where a taxi is turned up, it doesn't have the number plate that was on the app, so do avoid that because I have no idea what would happen. Now, the next scam that we're going to talk about is the fake petition scam. Essentially, this is where young women and children will approach you with a clipboard with a piece of paper that says something like donations for the blind, for the sick, things like that. They'll approach you, and then as soon as you sign the piece of paper, they'll demand money. Now, none of this money is actually going to go to charity, and so the best way to avoid this scam, which typically happens in queues for churches, it used to happen around Notre Dame a lot before it burnt down, basically just say "non merci" and ignore them. You should also be wary that when these people are shoving their clipboards in your face, you'll be so distracted that they'll get the chance to pickpocket you, especially when you can't really see your belongings because the clipboard's in the way. Now, the next scam I want to talk to you about is the gold ring scam. Though this can be used with other objects, essentially it happens around many of the bridges around Paris and along the Seine. Basically, you'll come around a corner and someone will come up to you and they'll say, "Look, I found this gold ring on the floor," and it won't be a real gold ring. And basically they'll say, "Oh, I found this, do you want it?" And then if you take it from them, they'll demand money. But it's not a real gold ring, no one's lost it, and they might try and pickpocket you as you're distracted. So essentially, if anyone approaches you, just say, "Go to the police, leave me alone." It happened to me one time when I was with my parents and we were really confused, but actually it's a very common scam. The next scam that we need to talk about is the string scam, which is also known as the friendship bracelet scam. Essentially, this is where young men around the base of the steps leading up to the Sacré-Cœur will trap you and then tie string around your hand, and then they'll demand money for it. Just in order to avoid this, you should avoid being like kind of cornered by these guys who'll be like, hey, what's up? And they'll try and tie the string, and that's when they'll demand money. So just avoid interactions with them, as they can be quite persistent. The next scam I want to talk about is the cup and ball scam. This is one of those Paris scams aimed at tourists in which you are genuinely led to believe that you have a chance of winning some big money, €50 or more. Basically, there will be a man or a woman with a little mat, a ball and 3 cups. They'll place the ball under one of the cups and mix the 3 up. The way you win money is by guessing which ball the cup is under. Bets can go as high as €50 and you'll be offered the chance to win double your money if you correctly guess which cup the ball sits under. The trick is that the game master will have accomplices posing as tourists in the crowd. These people will be allowed to win a number of times by guessing the correct cup the ball is under. However, when actual tourists start playing, they'll never win and lose all their money. In order to avoid losing money on this game, avoid playing it altogether. Something else which also often happens in Montmartre is that someone will approach you and ask if you want your portrait painted for free. This isn't free. As soon as they've done your portrait, they'll demand money. If you do want to get your portrait painted in Montmartre, then I highly recommend going to Place du Théâtre. This is where all of the licensed artists of Montmartre paint. It's technically illegal for artists to work outside of this space in Montmartre, and artists caught doing so can face a fine. With this being said, almost every time I head to Montmartre, people approach me as I'm walking around asking if they can paint my portrait, and they can honestly be a bit persistent and start following you. So I have no idea how strictly this is enforced. If you don't want to pay money for a portrait, just say no and walk away. This isn't necessarily a scam, but when you're up here in Montmartre, there'll be lots of people trying to sell you things, including bottled water. The scam about this is that you don't really know how the water's been stored, and there's lots of videos online of people storing in sewers and stuff like that, so it's not really the most savoury of waters. Another place where people might try and sell you things like beer, wine and cigarettes is around the Champ de Mars, which is around the base of the Eiffel Tower. Now, they're not really scamming you, because if you want to buy these things, then you can. You'll obviously pay a much elevated price, but again, you don't know how any of these goods have been stored, and so I would probably avoid them. Now that we're in a cafe, this is the perfect time to describe the final scam that I'm going to tell you about today, which is the free rose scam. Essentially, don't partake in this if you don't want to buy the rose. Basically, a guy will come into the cafe or into the bistro where you're sat and will offer you a rose. If you take it, they'll expect payment for this. I think a lot of people don't realize that these roses are actually for sale, because they can be quite insistent and be like, oh no, this is for you, you're beautiful and whatever. But really, only take the rose if you're willing to pay for it. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more Paris content. See you next time!